From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts. Welcome to Community Catalysts, the podcast that explores the qualities of community leadership and the many paths and forms it can take. I'm your host, Matt Lehrman. Whether you're joining for the first time or you're a regular listener, I'm glad you're a part of this community. Each episode, my guests share stories and insights to inspire leaders to build trust, foster collaboration, and strengthen effective governance in their communities. Be sure to follow or subscribe right now so you never miss an episode. Today, I'm honored to welcome Chuck Frye Jr., Vice Mayor and Ward 4 Representative for Fredericksburg, Virginia, a city where a deep, complex history carries different meanings and implications for its diverse population. Born in Savannah, Georgia, while his father was serving in the U.S. Army, Chuck grew up in Fredericksburg's Mayfield neighborhood, where he still resides with his family. For 23 years, he's worked as a UPS driver, and since 2014, he's served as an elected community leader. So if anyone knows what it takes to keep things moving and truly deliver for his community, it's Chuck Frye. Vice Mayor Chuck Frye, welcome to Community Catalysts.
Thank you, Matt. And you just made me think of something, talking about delivering for the community. I would say that is what can Brown do for you, because that's where I've been.
Let's start right there. Your work as a UPS driver must give you a unique connection to your community, far deeper, more personal than a lot of people in leadership. And so I'm thinking you're out there in neighborhoods every day, you're interacting with people, you're seeing situations and challenges firsthand, and you're understanding what life is really like for the people of your community. So it's not just about delivering packages, you're building relationships, you're gaining insights, you've got your finger on the pulse of your community. Chuck, how does that experience shape the way you understand people and how you approach leadership in your community?
Just by dealing with all walks of life in my day job is very interesting. You can kind of get in a bubble where you live at. You can get in a bubble based on whatever your kids have going on, what your neighbors have going on. So luckily for me, over the years by working at UPS, I've been pretty much 20 mile in a 20-mile radius on different routes that surrounds exactly where I live at. And it really gives me good insight on what's going on all around us.
Does everyone on your route know that you're on council, and do they greet you kind of with an agenda sometimes about city business?
Not everybody knows, and then the word kind of like spreads around a little bit. So not everybody knows. And since I've been on council for the last almost 11 years, I've been on only two different routes. So in my first route, when I first got elected, everybody knew. And then on this other route that I'm on now for the last, let's say, 6 years or so, on that route, some people know. Not everybody knows, but the ones that do know, they share a lot of what they think, or they ask me questions, and it's real respectable because I coached Parks and Rec with a guy named Romel Turner that coached me when I was a kid. As an honor of respect. I've been coaching with him, so like I'm engaged in community stuff. And a lot of people that know me, they know that I'm always on the move. So usually I'll get a lot of compliments on, something that's going on with youth activities and stuff like that.
You referred to the old UPS motto, what can Brown do for you? You're also the only African-American member of the city council, right?
That's correct.
Talk about the significance of that, especially after George Floyd's murder.
That's huge for me because when I came on council, we didn't have an African-American or minority representative at all. So when I came on council, we had it in the past, but for 4 years or so, there was not. And when I ran, and ever since then, I've been the only one. Not necessarily for what it means to me because of the George Floyd incident, but what it means for the community. My dad just passed 6 months ago. My mom died 20 years ago, but they're from this area. They're from this community. And it's a lot of old family ties, in Fredericksburg, Virginia. So I still get to interact with my mom's classmates, stuff like that. And these folks are 85, 86 years old now. And I still get to talk to these people who grew up with my mom, who knew my grandmother, all of that type of stuff. And I have this big honor of representing for their voices because they're the same folks that went to segregated schools right here in the city. They're the same folks that were, growing up and didn't have a voice.
Let's talk about that a little bit. Everyone elected to city council everywhere will say that they represent the people. What I think I'm hearing you say is, yeah, everyone says that, but as the only African-American member of this council, the African-American people in my community look at me as their representative. As I don't mean to be naive as I'm asking the question, but there is something about having a representative who you're connected to, who you have deep history with, who you have family, connection to over the years. You're saying that there's more to being a representative than just having the title of representative.
Absolutely. Because it's kind of like there's folks I know personally, like I get conversations that other people won't get. And it's because they feel comfortable with me. It's because they know that I understand the history of whatever they dealt with in their life.
I want to go back and ask you how you got motivated to public service in the first place. And as we were preparing for today's discussion, you shared with me that witnessing gun violence as a child left a really lasting impact on your life and ultimately inspired you to run for city council. I don't know if this is very painful or not, but can I ask you to share that story?
When I was 8 years old, my cousin Jasmine and I were playing in my grandmother's yard, kind of middle section of the neighborhood where I grew up at. Like, it's more of an intersection type of area in Fredericksburg. And I was 8 years old. My cousin and I were playing in my grandmother's yard at the time, and two guys were arguing. And long story short, it came to a situation where one of the guys was saying, "Hey, I'll kill you," and the other guy was kind of like, "You'll kill me," kind of like the argument went there, right? It was more just words at first. And the guy was like, "Yeah, I'll kill you." And the guy was like, more or less say, I don't play like that." And conversation went on for it probably was only a minute or so, minute and a half. And the guy walked across the street, came back, and I thought they were going to fist fight. And he actually pulled out a pistol and killed him right there in front of us.
Oh my.
And I was 8 years old at that time. And my cousin and I were kind of shocked. We were kind of just, of course we were, right? We were stuck. We were like really stuck in our tracks. We didn't know to run. We didn't know what to do. And I'm talking, I want to make sure I'm clear on this. This was 30 or 40 feet away from us where we were. We were in the yard and they were on the sidewalk. And that happened, and we were kind of stuck in our tracks, and we didn't know what to do because this guy's got this gun. He just shot this guy, and the guy dropped. And so the guy that shot him, he knew we were in the yard because we were running around in the yard, right? And he looked over at us and just kind of gave us this sense of security, like, "Hey, you guys all right?" He just kind of nodded his head at us like, like, "Don't be scared." And we were like, yeah, it was a weird scenario. He was looking at us like, "I'm not going to bother you." We didn't know much about guns and stuff. And when he dropped, we didn't know he was dead. And so I'll fast forward that to say around 2013 or so, because I came on council in 14. Around 2013, there was a scenario where my oldest son went to the bus stop. And I can tell you the time was 6:55 in the morning when his bus would come at 7. At 6:55, he would go to the bus. And at that particular time, there was a house near me that actually got shot up like 3 times within about 4-month period. And this particular morning, that house that got shot up at like 2:00 in the morning. And it was the location where my son caught the bus at. And I really like kind of blacked out because my son was like, "Hey, Dad, I'm going to the bus stop." And I was like, "All right, son, have a great day." The typical morning routine. And when he would step outside to go to the bus, because this is a neighborhood. This is not just this is a neighborhood where the neighbors know everybody. Like my neighbors know what time my kids go to the bus. And so when he stepped outside, he made it about halfway to the bus stop. And I usually go out, on the porch at that time, and it's like I said, it's 3 doors down. And when that happened, I stepped out on the porch and I just I really blacked out. And I was like, "Hey, get back down here." And to give you a reference to this, the police tape was out from the investigation from 2:00 in the morning, but the cops were gone. They had cleared the area within those 4 hours from the 2:00 shooting. And it was trash day that particular day. So you always put the trash out the night before, right, for trash. And we had a basketball goal in front of our house, just to give you more reference. The yellow police tape was attached all the way down to my house, 3 doors down, to my kid's basketball goal and the trash can that was outside. And it was still there, like roped off. And that's when I think that when I saw that, that's when I lost it. And so my reference point is that by me witnessing the murder, I didn't know the effect that it had on me until that morning, that many years later. And I said, wait a minute, I grew up, I witnessed murder, and now these shootings are going on. And, my son's going to the bus stop. I felt like I grew up in that environment of random shootings. It's not as like it's the worst place in the world, right? But when it happens, it happens. And that's really what got me going. I was like, I grew up in where kind of shooting was normal. And I felt like it was kind of okay because it was the old Black neighborhood. And it was like, if violence happens there, it's okay. We don't have to, as a community, we don't have to do anything about it. And so that's what kind of really got me going. I said, wait a minute, if I grew up like this, is this normal? If for my kids to grow up in the same situation? And that's where it was.
Are you saying that that's the moment when your child went outside and this was happening in your block? You basically said, enough of this. I'm going to take responsibility for leadership of my community. I'm going to step up to do something about this because we can't have this happen again.
Absolutely. And my wife was in the shower and I went in the bathroom. I said, hey, I'm running for council because if I were to pick up the phone that morning, I didn't feel like I had anybody I could call because it became normal.
You're saying that the decision to run for council, the decision to step up happened that fast?
Absolutely.
What you didn't say, but what I'm getting from the story is your decision to step up to leadership was not just about protecting your son or your children. It was about protecting the children in your community, about the quality of life in your community overall.
Absolutely.
Chuck, I want to move on. I want to ask you about Fredericksburg itself. Like many cities in the South, it's got deep Civil War history. It's also grown into a diverse and dynamic community. And with that complex history, there is some pretty hard conversations that have need to be conducted in your community. One of the most visible and emotional moments in recent history was the removal of a slave auction block. And in preparation for today, you shared with me a link to the Stone Ghosts in the South, an NBC News special on YouTube. I will put a link to that in the program notes.
When my uncle was young, he took a picture on the slave block from a Caucasian who wanted him to take a picture. And for him, it was about getting the money because he paid him. And when my grandfather realized that he had stood on that block to have his picture taken, my grandfather whipped him and threw the money away. And he told him what that block was and why he was never to go on that block again. That story has been with us since we were little children. This says, not only did we not want you here, but we still don't want you here.
The lone Black councilman pushed for a vote to remove the auction block. The 6 white members of the council said they voted to keep it in its place to educate future generations.
And you're featured in it, and it's fascinating, but the news story doesn't tell something here. You should explain what the slave auction block is, where it was at the time, but I want you to talk about what had to happen in order for that situation to change.
Okay, so I'm glad you referenced the Stone Ghost piece. What you'll see in that piece is the first phase of what happened in the city of Fredericksburg, which is huge because now there's something different going on. Long story short, I made a motion to remove the slave auction block in the city of Fredericksburg. So when I say slave auction block, I want everybody to understand that it's an actual stone block that was placed on one of the main streets in the city of Fredericksburg on the corner. And now it's where like restaurants are. It's like the thriving restaurant road type of area in the middle of the city of Fredericksburg.
And it's not like a big stage. It's like a stump, right? A big stone stump on the corner. And it has a plaque in front of it, but it's there.
It's there right there in your face. It was a plaque that, and I'm saying was happily, it was a plaque there that said, this is where I think goods and slaves were sold. It said it on the plaque itself, something of that nature. I can't remember the exact words, but it wasn't many words on there. It was to let you know that slaves were sold here at this site, and that's actually where slaves were sold.
In the news article, it says, yes, there had been an effort to commemorate the spot. But what really came out in your interview and the discussion there was the significance of that, especially to African Americans in the Fredericksburg community, was this deserved something different than the kind of commemoration that was on it, right? Talk about what it meant to the people at the time that it was sitting there.
When it was there, what it meant to the Black people of Fredericksburg was total disrespect. And I don't feel welcome here. I don't walk on that side of the street. I don't take my family on that street at all. If I'm walking on that street by any chance, I go to the opposite side. I don't want to be downtown. I can't enjoy myself to have dinner, to go get ice cream with my kids, grandkids, because of the block. And I will say this, and there are facts behind it. And I'm speaking at this moment, I guess, let me say this for Black people, okay?
Yeah.
I'm tired of walking down the street. I'm tired of seeing people spit on it. I'm tired of seeing people stand on it and take pictures and make a mockery of it. And that's what the block meant to a lot of people in Fredericksburg. Some now I'll just say this. That's for the folks that were talking to me all the time, okay?
Yeah.
So and then some people felt like that's part of history, and including Black people. Some people felt like that's part of history and, whatever. My whole thing was there was never a respectable way to tell the story about the slave block. It was actually that you were walking down the sidewalk and it's in your face. And you would literally see people who didn't know, because Fredericksburg is big on tourism. This is where Civil War happened and the Battle of Fredericksburg, all kinds of things happened here. Their history, like of Abraham Lincoln passing through Fredericksburg, there are all kinds of, just for another reference point, this is where George Washington, this is his childhood home, our first president. So this is a deeply historic city.
So tell us the rest of the story. What was the hard conversation that had to take place that got that slave auction block actually moved?
Okay, so from that piece, the Stone Ghost of the South, from that piece, it shows where there was a 6-1 vote to keep the slave block in the city of Fredericksburg. And I was the one vote to get it out of there. And I was the one that made the motion. So that was a weird scenario for the city at that time. I was disappointed, if anything. I wasn't mad, because I felt like there was, just like when people saying, well, nobody's listening to me, I felt like at that time that I was like, well, I don't know if because I know my council members, right? I know my fellow council members, and I know some of the things that we tackled together. And they knew me by that time, right? And they knew my heart, and they knew I cared about the city, even back to referring to like the gun give back, right? They know that I have a big heart about caring for what's happening in the city. And I didn't look at them as bad people for voting against me on that. I just felt like they didn't understand. So I took it as like a learning lesson. Like, I don't think they get it. I don't think that they understand what it is, because by Fredericksburg being based on history, a lot of people just kind of looking at it as his history story, this historic story, and I was like, I don't think y'all get how people feel. So it led to community conversations that never happened in our city.
Tell us about those conversations.
We had these round tables, our city staff and everybody did a great job, man, organizing these round tables really about race. And there wasn't anything going on in the world at that time about race, right? It's not like there was, so we were having these community discussions about race based around the slave block. And so the conversation became a lot bigger than the slave block. It became about, how people are treated and how people feel about their city. And so the conversations got, they became more broader than the slave block. And what happened was, in the community, it became a level of understanding.
And who facilitated the conversation? Did the council members engage in the conversations, or who?
Everybody participated. We brought in an organization that led the charge, and they hosted the community meetings. And what I did out of respect was, let's just say, I'll give a number, maybe there were 10 or 15 community conversations. I only engaged probably in 3 or 4 of them on purpose, because I was leading it, and I was leading the charge in removal of the slave block. And I didn't want to water down anybody's thoughts if they felt yay or nay. So I don't want to always be in the room, because I didn't want people to feel like they couldn't go against what I said or felt bad because they didn't agree with me. And so I wanted people to have their own opinions and express it in their own way, because I just felt like it was an opportunity for the community to speak. And me as a leader, I think I can run my mouth enough, about a point, just like anybody else can. But I didn't feel like at that time, I felt like I did enough by starting it. And I didn't want to take away, somebody else's voice, or a lot of people real timid about, conversations like that. And if they're open enough to come to a community meeting, I didn't want to be in the room to kind of keep voicing my opinion of saying they should leave.
Yeah. Chuck, how many people would have come to any of these conversations, and were they mostly African-American people, or did you get a very diverse group?
It was everybody in the city. And we had hundreds of people, the people that respect me for like this leadership type of stuff, right? I want them to have the voice as well, And if somebody wants to, this is another thing that I'm big on, man. If somebody doesn't like something, I like setting the stage where they have to say it publicly. Petitions, right? I grew up in the whole philosophy of, if you wanted something done, get petitions and get support. And then you take those petitions after you rally all these people up, right? Your neighbors and the community, you get all these people together and there's one issue, right? I never saw it that way. I saw petitions as a fault. I saw petitions as a setup, because let's just say it's a playground, right? And you felt like your neighborhood or your side of town deserved a new playground. And you go out and do a petition for it. There's a budget cycle that people don't know about. There's a process that people don't know about. So while you're asking for a playground and you're spreading the word about a playground, there's somebody on the other side of town that knows exactly who to approach with the playground concept. By the time you make it to council or wherever this goes, hopefully it gets to council, right? By the time you get there, it's not a budget item, because for one, you have to wait a year because of the budget cycle. And somebody else took the playground.
The petition is a very shallow way of operating, that you actually have to get into the system and work the levers of the system, which happens over a long period of time.
You can do 300 signatures on a petition compared to going to city council and speak for 30 seconds. You can speak in public comments for 30 seconds and say, we haven't had a playground upgrade, or we don't have a playground on this side of town.
Yeah.
You can say that for 30 seconds and walk out of the meeting and get the playground.
At the right place.
At the city council meeting. You're right. At the right place.
At the right place at the right time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just my take.
This is in the midst of the pulling down of the Confederate monuments.
I'm glad you said that. This was before that.
This is before that.
That's the beautiful part of this. This was before that. It actually was happening around the same time that the Charlottesville situation happened.
Yeah.
And the local news folks kept getting it wrong, because they were saying that we were doing it because of Charlottesville. And that wasn't the truth. We were engaged in it. It was around the same time, but they were trying to base it like we were talking about Charlottesville. What happened in Charlottesville when the lady ran through the crowd and all of that stuff. That's not what it was.
You're talking about the woman who was killed when the car came.
The woman got killed when the guy, ran in the crowd.
Drove his car into the crowd. Yeah, who were protesting.
Right. And then so they tried to use a reference that's why we were doing it. And I was like, nah, that's not why we're doing it. It should go. And so I was so happy that we were ahead of that curve. We were ahead of times on that. Because what happened was we had finally voted. You say finally because it felt like forever for me. We had another vote, and we voted to remove it. This time it was 6-1 vote. There was one council member that still wanted it to stay. So the vote actually, I would say, flipped. It was 6-1 against me, and then it was 6-1 with me.
How long was it between these two votes?
I think it was over a year. Because we had all this extra community dialogue in between time. And we had a lot of community dialogue.
You're saying there was actual genuine heart-to-heart conversation, and it actually changed minds of people in the community.
Yep, by having dialogue. It was an amazing experience. It was tough at the time going through the experience. I'll give you an example. There was a guy named Leroy Lewis that I grew up with his sons, and he grew up with my mom, in this community. There's somebody I look up to. He really felt defeated by that slave block. It really turned me up another notch because that was something that he couldn't beat. And when I saw that, it really changed my perspective even more, even from what I thought. Because I was like, man, that's crazy that Mr. Lewis has been dealing with that his whole life, and he never had a chance to express it.
Chuck, I imagine that there are people listening to this interview who have situations in their communities that require hard conversations like what you just had. Maybe not about a slave auction block, but something that has left people feeling defeated. And I'm wondering, what advice do you have for leaders elsewhere to take up the work of hosting these kinds of hard conversations? What would you tell them is their responsibility or how they should approach this?
Do what's right first. Do what's right. If it's on your heart to do something, I would tell you to do it. Be unapologetic about your approach, because if there's a situation, and I would say this, if there's a situation and you want to speak on it, and if it's near and dear to your heart and you know the pain of whatever it is in your community, I would say once you open your mouth up, the words will come out itself. You don't need a script. You know what I mean? You don't need anything. Just say what it is. And I would say if you get to it kind of like raw and uncut, if you get directly to it, you can get results out of that. If you water it down and sugarcoat to get to the point, you never get to the point of it.
You're saying you have to be willing to dwell in the pain of the hard conversation, bringing people together, not knowing how it's going to turn out, but letting people actually get into it.
Yeah, you can open the door by starting a conversation, and then you can actually let the people engage and express themselves. I'll speak from experience. If it's black and white issues or something like that, that's race related. If you're still fortunate enough to have folks that are around doing segregation in your community, now's a good time to start that conversation before they leave this earth. Because the knowledge base of personal experiences are coming from those people.
We should just finish the story. Where does that auction block sit today?
Happy to say it's in our Fredericksburg area museum now. And there's a whole story to the actual slave auction block. But it's on Charles and William Street is where the slave block was located. It's down in the Fredericksburg area museum. And we're working on something now to where when folks come up on that site, instead of them seeing the slave block, they'll get information about the slave auction block. And if they want to go to the Fredericksburg area museum to see the slave auction block, right? And I'm saying, I'm just, let me give you a little bit more context on this. What was happening to people when they were walking down the street that didn't know that the slave auction block was there, the actual stone that slaves were sold on? What was happening to families was a lot of mixed reactions. And you would have families walk up on the slave block, see what it was, and it would just take their breath away. You would have people crying, standing there hugging each other. That's the type of emotions that the slave block was bringing out.
Yeah.
Then you had other people who didn't care, who would spit on it. And you know what I'm saying? So now if you're walking down William and Charles at that corner, you'll see this information. And now it's like, wow, this is a site where slaves were sold, right? And now the conversation is like, oh my God. And then there's a little bit of relief in knowing this history. And then folks can say, I can walk 2 blocks down the street or 1 block down the street and go to the Fredericksburg Area Museum and see this block. If I want to see it, if I actually want to see it, less tears on that corner now. You still get some sadness, but less tears of the shock value that it was bringing to people.
Yeah, the corner's been restored to public use, and the story has been relocated to a place where it can be presented with the appropriate context.
Yeah.
Chuck, I have one last thing I need to ask you about here. As we were preparing for today, you shared with me how important it is to you to engage young people, especially people who are not yet of voting age, to get them connected to civic affairs. I'd like you to talk about not just why is that so important to you, but I want to imagine that you could look into the future 10 years or more. What are some of the challenges or opportunities in Fredericksburg that you hope would be addressed 10 years from now because you got youth involved in civic affairs right now?
Really just the respect of your community and loving your city. Like a lot of cities with big ball teams and stuff like that, in areas like where I am, where they're not national ball teams, I think that what you can do is invest in your youth and make them at least love their city or feel loved by their city. It's the same thing as a ball team for me, right? If so, like FXBG is our logo in the city, Fredericksburg. That's FXBG.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can love FXBG, right? You only gonna make FXBG better. You're gonna make Fredericksburg better as a community. And if you are a teenager, especially, and you feel kind of ousted or not part of your own city, you're gonna grow into an adult, right? That doesn't love the place where they live at. And I just feel like if you show enough love, or if adults show enough love to the kids that can't vote, right? Or work on programming that involves kids, right? If you can do more for the kids, they're going to grow up loving where they're from even more. And when it comes opportunities for bad things to happen, I see it as those kids will be like, nah, not in my city, because my city has done too much for me, right? To tear my city up.
Chuck Frye, it's been wonderful to talk to you. I thank you so much for the insights, and congratulations on all the good work you're doing in Fredericksburg.
Appreciate you, Matt. And thank you for spreading the word to other community leaders, and everybody, because we can all learn from each other.
Again, thank you to my guest, Vice Mayor Chuck Frye of Fredericksburg, Virginia. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review it on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen. Your feedback helps others discover the show. And don't forget to follow or subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. This episode was edited by Nick Living the Dream Tantillo. Our executive producer is John Little. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. If you have a question or comment about today's topic, I'd love to hear from you. Reach me at 602-688-2724 or Matt, M-A-T-T, at socialprosperity.us. Do you have a story of lessons learned on your journey to leadership? Click the podcast guest link in the program notes. I'm always looking for instructive and inspiring voices to feature on the show. Today's conversation reminds us that leadership isn't about flashy titles. It's about showing up every day, doing the work, and, delivering for the people you serve. Let Vice Mayor Chuck Frye's insights inspire you to embrace hard conversations, stay grounded, and keep moving your community forward one step, one connection, and one hard conversation at a time. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with another Community Catalyst.